Hello and welcome everyone. I'm Liz Walker, ISCA member and host for today's 6th Annual Art Innovation Talk. These are presentations to educate, inspire, and ignite your imagination. These 45-minute Zoom presentations are being offered live exclusively to our ISCA members on a quarterly basis. They cover a variety of topics to enrich, encourage, and support our members' creative journeys, which is a key component of our mission statement here at ISCA. Before I introduce our presenter, Kim Santini, let me introduce you to today's moderator, Kim Gill, and today's Zoom manager, April Rimpo, who is working behind the scenes. A big thank you to them and our Art Innovation Talks Committee for making this presentation possible. Now it's time to introduce Kimberly Kelly Santini. Kimberly is a painter with a BFA in painting and a BA in art history. She worked in traditional career path for over a decade. In 2001, she began with commissioned portraiture and committed herself to daily painting in 2006, a practice she continues to this day. Kimberly was honored as the official artist of the 2015 Kentucky Derby and has worked with the American Kennel Club and designed a wine label, and of course had exhibits and shows, solo shows across the country. Kimberly was also the ISCA 2020 scholarship recipient, so you may recognize her name from that. A firm believer in community involvement, Kimberly also holds leadership roles in the Romeo Guild of Art and the Detroit Society of Women Painters and Sculptors in the state of Michigan, USA, where she lives. Welcome to Kimberly.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here. And before I start out, I really want to thank the board at ISCA, the volunteers. Any organization that's run by volunteers is just tremendously valued. And I just want to recognize all the people whose work went into making not just my speech or presentation today possible, but the entire program. And it's just such an honor to be presenting to such an esteemed and deeply talented group of creatives. So thank you. Thank you for your eyes and your ears this afternoon. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here so that we can, so I've got a slideshow for you. All right. Okay, so we've established that I am a painter. And I'm a painter who, up until recently, was completely and totally head over heels in love with color. Color drove everything for me. I loved everything about her. She grabs you or me from across the room. She can both simmer and boil. She molds form. She sets the mood. She can race you to the focal point. When I lay out a fresh palette, I just want to swoon because the possibility of all that color, it just teases me from the very beginning of my painting process. But I have a confession to make to you today, because I think I'm falling out of love with color and starting to have a love affair with line. In a recent series of work I created, line snuck up on me. She just hooked my heart, something fierce. Line is elegant, straightforward, and I was surprised to see how very sexy line could be. Line is just as versatile and fun as color, but she has a wee bit more seriousness to her. And it could be that I'm so intrigued with line right now because I feel less versed in her magic. She's all very new to me, very fresh, and that can be really exciting. And I think I know how line made her way in, because despite my insistence for years to the contrary, I learned recently that value trumps color. And so when I begrudgingly accepted that truth, I started trying to consciously build compositions that leaned into value. I really wanted to rely less on color and more on value to steer my viewer's eye and create intriguing designs. And line is a natural mechanism that builds value jumps. but I think I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here. This is an early drawing of mine. And it's here because I want to tell you about line being one of my earliest loves that I kind of forgotten about, or if I'm being honest. My earliest memory is sitting with my dad, asking him to draw me a horse. Every day I would ask him to draw me something different. And he would just sit with paper from the recycling bin and a simple pencil. He wasn't trained as an artist. His drawings were simple and pure. All he wanted to do was appease his little girl. He didn't study art. He wouldn't have chosen to draw if I hadn't asked him to. And I honestly don't even know why I started asking him to draw for me. Playing this game with my father thrilled me. It was my favorite part of every night. And he continued to oblige for a long time. His drawings, his lines were the first time I saw how to take the things in my head and breathe life into them. Line made my imagination real. And I was a little girl with a huge and very active imagination. Drawing became my first love. Watching my father draw and then learning how to do it myself, it was a gateway drug to being an artist, to where I am right now, if I hadn't fallen in love with line as a young child. Now, I've been a working artist for over 20 years. I'm best known for my animal paintings. And if you're new to my story, I'm going to give you a really quick Cliff's Notes version. So I started out painting pet portraits, selling them on eBay of all places, back in the dawn of the internet. My work gathered traction over the years. I was lucky enough to find gallery representation. I got fantastic commission opportunities. I began teaching, and now I'm able to focus exclusively on painting whatever I want every single day. That means no commissions or painting to others' expectations or painting to match somebody's couch. This is a huge leap in my ability to create. And I'm going to talk to that in a little bit. But I was a daily painter, and the daily painting bit, committing to doing 2 to 3 commissioned pet portraits weekly, was the most important gift that I ever gave myself. Obviously, animals were one of my earliest loves, and they still are. And I've worked my entire life to get to right here where I am now, in control of what it is I'm creating and following the things that I love in my process. So I mentioned I was a daily painter. I committed to that back in 2006. So it was pretty early on in my art career. And what I did in 2006 was I actually created or named my project. I called it paintingadagoday.com, bought the domain name, published a blog under that same address. And the premise was that I was going to commit to doing a warm-up of sorts every day. And that was going to be a daily pet portrait. And it was accompanied with a daily blog, as well as a newsletter that I sent out to my subscribers. The blog and the newsletter both contained the same information about the dog, including an image of the painting and a little bit of backstory, maybe about the dog or the dog's family or my painting process. That project actually went a little viral before there even was the concept of anything going viral. And it lasted for well over a dozen years. Now, I'm still painting every day, and I still manage the Painting a Dog a Day blog. I'm just simply not doing dog portraits every day. But at one point in the Painting a Dog a Day project early on, I had a wait list of over 18 months for daily portraits. So this is Martha, and Martha was one of my earlier Dog a Day paintings. Now you're looking at Cannonball, and Cannonball was a daily painting from about 8 years into the project. And I show these two, next to each other because I want you to see the difference in complexity and the skill set required. Daily commitment to working can do this for anyone. If you show up every day and you pick up your tools, you're going to grow and learn like you just cannot imagine. And daily painting was the best gift I could have ever given myself. It was permission to do the things that I loved to do the most every single day. I got to draw. I got to draw animals. I got to play with color. Daily painting also taught me some great life management skills. When I opened my studio, I had 3 children under the age of 6. So I also worked from a home studio, and that meant out of necessity, I had to integrate my art practice with my life and with my children's lives. I did not have the luxury of punching in, doing a day's work, and punching out. I had to always be ready to jump in and get to work, whether it was at my easel or cleaning up a mess that a child had made. And along the way, I also discovered that when my work aligned with my own interests or fascinations, those paintings were the easiest for me to make the time to create. I've got a really busy schedule. I have a lot of demands. It's super easy to get off track when life throws you a couple curveballs in the middle of a day. But it was equally important for me, or I found that it was easier for me, despite those curveballs, if I knew I had a tremendous prize waiting for me to get to on my easel, if I was super excited about what was waiting for me in there, I would always make time to get in there and do it. So when I painted things I was curious about, or the things that thrilled me, like rabbits, those were the paintings that fell off my brushes and also gave me the most satisfaction. Realizing this was also a key factor, something that I try to lean into and pursue or honor every single day. So returning back to getting to do the things that I love all of the time, and I talked about drawing and drawing animals and playing with color. Well, I also really love to have fun. And having 3 children around the house while I was trying to work, you could either laugh about it or you could cry about it. And I did a lot of both. But soon enough, I learned that if I made my workday a fun thing, if I invited play into my studio, my kids wanted to parallel play or create with me, but then ultimately I had a little bit better of a time in there too. It didn't really feel like work so much. So I made a painting game of sorts so that on the days when I didn't feel like going into the studio, and there were a lot of them, there was something joyful there to greet me. I gave myself permission to indulge in the things that thrilled me, my subject matter. When I started out, I was painting dogs because they thrilled me. They were intriguing. I loved meeting customers. I loved hearing the animal stories. I loved the people that the dogs brought into my lives. And at a certain point, I wanted a little bit more. And so I started to look for other things that thrilled me, like toys. Did I feel like painting Yoda one day? Sure, why not? I would pull my Yoda puppet down or my Kermit puppet down or any of my kids' favorite toys, and I would do a painting of them. I actually created a series of 100 small pieces. They were all under 6x8 of toys, and worked on those one day. And they were a great diversion or break from the Painting a Dog a Day program. Because remember, when you make the project, when you define the rules, you can also choose to break them. So even though I had committed to painting a dog a day, I also could give myself permission to paint something else if I felt it was going to benefit me or make me happier in the long run. The other thing that I did was I indulged in being present with and enjoying my process. The things I loved doing, like working directly with my brush, learning to draw with paint versus other tools, using the colors that gave me goosebumps just because I love arbitrary color, choosing subject matters, combinations of details that feel right at the time. I don't need to rationalize or explain anything that I put in my paintings. Just picking up my brushes and doing what I wanted was a key to creating a piece that I found fascinating and satisfying. But the other thing that Painting Daily did was it taught me I make lots of bad paintings. Those bad paintings are part of every artist's process, right? We all have them. We all have lots of them. But making a bad painting at a certain point, it stopped becoming critical or tragic because I knew I'd be back in the studio the next day and I could try it again. Daily painting taught me that risk-taking wasn't risky. Paintings were not terribly precious, and there were plenty of ideas to pursue. So these bad paintings taught me how to formulate what ifs, and what ifs are a huge factor, a huge piece of how I build my art today. When something goes south, I tell myself, okay, this didn't work out, but what if I did it this way instead? Or what if I tried this instead? And this poor canvas here had so many bad paintings and what ifs pursued on her surface before she finally came into her glory. What I didn't realize until later was that via daily painting and the latitude that I'd given myself, I was subconsciously laying the groundwork for intuitive painting. What is intuitive work? Well, it's sort of like heading off blindly on a hike. There's no map. You don't know where you'll end up, but you pack lots of snacks because you know it's going to take a lot longer than you planned. Intuitive work for me means that I bring an idea to the easel, like that of a fox as a spirit guide, or that of a history of rabbits or generations of rabbits. And then I let go of expectations. I fall into my flow state and I try to allow my decision-making to all come from my gut or be subconscious. Creating from my gut, trusting that the technique I know, that technique that I practiced daily for 12 years plus, trusting that that technique is enough to carry the piece through to completion. The details reveal themselves via the process if I get out of my own way and try not to force any preconceived notions onto the painting. I have to trust that my love for the practice of pushing paint is all that I need. And I don't hold myself to any predetermined rules. I throw all those rules out every time I pick my brushes and try to explore new territory. So a perfect example of this is my ongoing series. In case the daily painting project didn't clue you in, I love to work in a series. So my current ongoing series began roughly in February, March of 2020, and I call them the Talisman. The bulk of the paintings you've seen in today's slideshow come from the Talisman series. The Talisman paintings are spirit animal paintings or totems of a sort, and they're built from the things that I encounter in my life. The ideation of these paintings is rooted in a game that I play 24/7, where the subject matter, that being the animal, the spirit animal, is chosen from things that show up repeatedly in my life. I call those moments winks. So how do the winks arrive? How do these animals show up? I'll give you an example. Let's say that I'm running an errand and I'm driving down a country road and there's a little fox trotting alongside, in the embankment next to the road. Then later in the day, I'm grocery shopping and I encounter a woman in the frozen fruit aisle and she has a fox on her sweater. That's really surprising to me. Don't see very many fox sweaters out in the world. And then later that night, I'm sitting and watching TV, and in the sitcom set of the program I'm watching, there's a piece of fox artwork on the wall behind the actors. So I've had 3 fox winks in one day. That tells me I need to invite a fox to my easel. I also pay attention to the winks or the animals that show up in my dreams. I look for them in what I'm reading, both fiction and nonfiction, artwork, articles that I may encounter online, the TikTok, reels, random conversations or text exchanges with friends. Everything in my life is fair game. And what shows up gets invited to the easel. So I play this game in my head about the choice of initial subject matter, but I also have one that I play when I start the painting. This approach embraces my love of drawing with a little bit of a dose of risk-taking. I draw my subject matter and then I destroy it. I know it sounds strange. I create something, then I create chaos, and then I try to build order from it. What you're looking at are 2 of a series of drawings, a series, that I called Psyche drawings. These were drawings that I did during COVID, and they began shortly into the lockdown. And what I did was I gave myself permission every day to go into the studio and sit with the realm of emotions that just seemed like a constant barrage. And I would draw faces that represented those emotions. I would visualize it. I would contort my face or tense my body or allow that emotion to completely possess me. And then I would draw from that spot. And I wasn't trying to draw with a model or any reference photos. I was just drawing from my gut. It was just a pure emotional reaction. And I would make these drawings and then I would destroy them. I would erase them. I would smear them. I would smudge them. I would get them wet. I would pour medium on them. And then when they were dry, I would tease little details out of them and try to salvage something from the chaos. And this create, destroy, rebuild process, it really was cathartic. It was healing in a way. And I found it so important of a ritual to myself that I latched onto it and actually adapted it for my painting process. And this is a close-up of one of those Psyche drawings. And it's much larger on your screen than it is in life because these drawings were roughly 1 to 1.5 inches large or tall. And actually what I realized was that a local to me TV station, public TV station, actually created an episode. They have an artist series called Under the Brush, and they filmed an episode with me creating these. And what I'm going to do is share that link with ISEA after our talk in case anybody's interested in seeing that, because it's streamable. You might, if you're particularly interested in this process. But this whole build and create, build and destroy, and then recreate or reconstruct chaos is a big part of my process to a certain extent. Now I'm going to show you a little time-lapse video here. I wish I could paint this fast, but this is a little time-lapse video of how I start my paintings. I start with a contour drawing of the animal. And my animals are typically facing the viewer, very close to the picture plane, with a body that is solidly squared off in a non-confrontational way. The vast majority of my paintings follow this formula at the onset. It's really important to me that the viewer be seen, like really, really seen. So many people in the world just are not seen or appreciated for who they are. And for me, this is a primary value, and it has drizzled into or bled into my work. And it's really important that the spirit guide sees and validates the viewer in a comforting way, which I suppose is another way for me to link my personal priority system or the things that I value with my artwork by fusing my actual life and my art. So I started with a contour drawing, and I was using a big piece of Taylor's chalk. And when you saw me move the piece off to the side, I was actually hitting it with a blend of different acrylic mediums and brayering that on and brushing it on. And that changes the lines that I've put down. That Taylor's chalk will move when it becomes wet. And so the quality of the line really shifts and changes. I absolutely love to start my work with contour drawing. And that's another way for me to celebrate or lean into my love of lines. And I particularly like to use soft, smeary drawing tools or something water soluble in these contour drawings, because then when I go back into them with medium or acrylic paint, the pigments or the material that those lines are made up of literally get dragged or blended into the paint, and the lines become a part of those paint marks, which is something I super appreciate. So I draw the line, or I do my contours, I move the lines, I go in with a really big brush and I fill in and smudge some arbitrary color about, begin to establish my value ranges. I'll go in and draw again, and I'll move those lines again, and then I'll go in with a little bit more paint. And I just continue to seesaw back and forth between everything. And also notice that I'm using a really big brush. I love to work from general to specific, and I'm really impatient So the larger the brush, the happier I am in these earlier stages. It also allows me, because I'm working with arbitrary color, to just really lose myself, to dive into or jump in or fully appreciate the color, the hues, the different families of color that I'm playing with in the earlier stages. I also really want juicy, swooshy marks. I know that's really technical term, juicy, swooshy. But I feel that the more fluid the marks are in this stage, the more interesting they are for me to work with going forward. And I mean, honestly, my gut just does not like making tiny little marks from the get-go. They're not satisfying. So I'm not going to work that way. I get to make the rules as to how I'm going to spend my time at the easel, and I'm going to honor my gut, and I'm going to do the things that feel right and enjoyable to me. So let me flip back here to my slideshow. So I mentioned that I use arbitrary color in the early stages of my work. And one of the questions I get asked most frequently is, how do I choose arbitrary color? Or how do I choose a color palette for a painting in general? And I often find that I'm choosing color subconsciously. I've acknowledged or recognized this looking back historically, based on my most recent, strongest memory. Why is that? Well, do you know why we remember things? We remember things because they elicited an emotional response in us. An emotional response is all it takes for an experience or a fact to slide into our gray matter. So if I'm creating from a rooted space that includes all of the things that I love, doesn't it make sense to start a painting from colors that made me feel something important? Why not lean into the joy or whatever feeling it was that I experienced while I was rock hounding with my girlfriends yesterday afternoon, and start the piece from the colors that I saw and felt that connected me to that space or experience or emotion, that whole memory of that day spent with them. That way, my painting from the get-go is infused with bits of what I love. So the bear painting that you just saw me demo was started a couple weeks ago in the throes, deep in the heart of a Michigan autumn, which is dense with color. And that bear was very much influenced by autumn colors. But my work can be in response to so many other things. And this is a mama bear painting, and the mama bear paintings are part of the Talisman series. But this painting in particular was inspired by a particularly unusual violet sky that I saw the morning I was working on her when I was taking the trash out. And that violet sky just sort of melted into the softest, faintest blue at the horizon. And it really moved me. And so when I came to this painting and working on the negative space in this painting, and coming back out from around the trees and up over the top of her head, I really felt like the left-hand side of that painting deserved to acknowledge that the colors that I saw and felt in the sky that morning. And as I'm working on these paintings and I'm making these swooshy marks, I play another game too. Do you remember the hidden pictures puzzles that used to be inside of Highlights magazine? Looking for identifiable shapes tucked into a drawing, a line drawing that included many other things. The line drawing was about something else, completely like kids on a playground. And then you had to find the banana peel or the frog or whatever it was. And I absolutely loved playing the hidden pictures game. So why do I have to stop? Or why do I have to have a copy of Highlights magazine to continue to do that? Why can't I adapt the rules to hidden pictures and use it in my own artwork? So I start looking inside my swooshy, whooshy marks at the very get-go for hidden things, for clues, for hints or winks at what should come next. Is there maybe a portal hiding out in the darkest areas of a painting? If that's a portal, then where could it take me? Where might it lead? Does it go into the nighttime sky? And if it does, and this is a mama bear painting, are there any constellations that have bears in them? And if there are bear constellations, what are they named? And are there mythological stories or folklore about those bears? What other details in that story can I maybe hint at or invite into the painting in some way? I just keep going, building these connections of possibilities to the marks as they show up in my piece. And it sort of builds a little behind the scenes narrative that the viewer may never necessarily clue into, but it's all part of my whole experience of building and weaving this painting. And it's these connections that form a pool of candidates for objects that could be included in the end piece. So this is a perfect example of that. On the left, you see an in-process image of the painting Goldie. On the right, you see her finished. She's actually on the easel behind me too at the moment. But I mentioned that I work from general to specific when you saw that earlier demo that I did. And I'm working in layers, often arbitrarily, until the piece actually feels finished. And lots of times during various stopping points, I will take a piece of chalk and go into my painting and draw or audition some ideas out. And that's what you see happening here on the left-hand side. But the vast, like from the fox's right-hand edge over to the right side of the painting, that's all my first pass. I have not touched that or altered that in any way. That was my initial underpainting, and I focused on building the fox up in subsequent layers, but I never touched that right-hand side of the piece, nor did I touch the bottom of that painting either. And those orange marks that are there from my underpainting that were just arbitrary orange marks that I popped in, they feel like goldfish to me, and they continued to feel like goldfish to me. And I loved that idea so much that I invited goldfish to come into the painting. And you can see that with just a couple extra additional brush marks, I was able to create a number of goldfish swimming at Goldie's feet, or at the fox's feet. And I also added a hint of one in the right-hand side as I began to articulate the shapes and the design for that painting. So this is a great visual example of how my process bounces, or how the ideas in my head bounce from a swooshy mark to something arbitrary or unexpected ending up in the piece. Now, I recently hung a solo show called Fox Medicine. It just came down actually over the weekend. And for the show, I created over 70 new pieces during the course of a year. And I used the fox as my spirit guide or spirit animal. And I explored her in all sorts of different media, I should say in mixed media drawings, as well as paintings like Goldie. And when I was beginning to work on Fox Medicine, I really wanted to dive into the routine that I talked about specifically when I was drawing the psyche faces, that draw, destroy, rebuild process. But I wanted to do it at a larger scale and with a few more materials. And the little drawing that you see here next to the postcard is an example of that. And these are more. I wanted to make larger drawings that were variants of that process, but I also wanted to dive into a body of work that represented a singular spirit animal and just explore the variants that I could create and really push my materials. And remember the game I talked about of the what if questions? So I'm always asking and chasing them in my work. What if I go bigger? What if I add paint to my drawing tools? What if I invert the horizon? What if I fracture or shift the scale of the animal's head to its body? The what ifs just go on and on and on. What if I allow the fox to dissolve? So the idea of having permission and a venue to pursue these drawings while tackling a serious sized pile of what ifs was so appealing. I ordered copious quantities of 18 by 24 paper, expanded charcoal and graphite drawing tools. I mean, I just invited all of the things that gave me joy onto my pink table, which also gives me joy. And I just set to it. And I'm going to show you a little video that will demonstrate that drawing process. Let's put the square bear out of the way. And let's play this for you. So I draw from memory because memory is based on things that elicit emotional responses. If I'm drawing a fox from memory, what I recall is going to be weighted to the things that I value. That means the piece is going to look uniquely like my own. It's not going to look like anybody else's fox. It's not going to look like anybody else's reference photo. Skinny legs, fluffy tail, inky eyes. And this particular version, I was thinking of the fox as my spirit guide or spirit animal, and that she was carrying all my troubles. And I thought, if she's got to carry all of my baggage, she's going to absorb it all in her body. She's going to be like this big old bloated vessel. The fox I draw becomes an extension of the fox as I feel, see, or think about her. I find that when I do use reference photos, my foxes tend to be a bit more representational and a bit less mysterious. So it's about finding a balance for both. And I am just really playing. I've got music playing pretty loudly in the background. My lines will often be in response to the rhythm or the lyrics. Sometimes I'll even choose a tool based on how loud or soft the music might be. And I'm just playing purely with line here. All of these tools are tools that create lines. And I am totally playing without any distraction or noise of color, and just really leaning into what line can do. And that's when line snuck into my heart, was right here. I learned that she could build form in an entirely different way, that she was fascinating, she was elegant, she was heavy or dainty. She could build up texture that I could not get. I could get such amazing grit from line and charcoal and all of these tools that I could not get in my paintings. Line could be loud, line could be quiet. She was pensive, joyful, expectant. She was all of the things that color had previously been to me. I was really surprised to see that when I delivered the work and it was installed, and these drawings, these lines hung out with color, I couldn't take my eyes off of the drawings. I could not take my eyes off of line. Me, a professed colorist, in love with line. So now I find myself at a crossroads. Fox Medicine Show came down last week. The pieces are all here in the studio, stacked against the walls, hanging up. I'm studying them collectively and individually. I'm sitting with my morning pages and reflecting on them and what I've learned and where I could go every single day. So I'm trying to figure out what they have to say as I play with new iterations of my old routine. Do I want to invite more line in and ask color to be subservient? I'm not sure. Will color acquiesce? Maybe I'll find a way for line and color to coexist. If I paint the things I'm curious and fascinated about while indulging in color and line, maybe this will happen. What my gut is telling me to do is to lean into that. And I've learned that following my gut is where the best adventures lie. I have one other quick point to make before I tie things up. I would be really remiss in talking about this recent body of work. if I didn't give thanks to my weekly critique group, we call ourselves the Brushes. I can't say enough things about the value of having a critique group that you can trust and lean into. And these women have certainly done that for me for a number of years now. And I just believe my work is all the stronger and all the more cohesive because of their wise advice and their support. So this is just a little picture of us, less one troublemaker from a retreat that we took out over the summer. I want to thank everybody so much for listening to my little love story about color and line and intuition. I invite you to stay in touch with my socials info, which is here on this slide. Also, if any of my process or approach sounds intriguing to you, I do have an online classroom. It's a student membership program hosted on Patreon. I coach how to discover your own creative voice while also transparently modeling my own example and sharing my painting process, critiques of my work, ideation, inspiration, and other relevant topics. So you are welcome to join us over there or shoot me a message if you have any questions about that. But thank you. I will turn things over for questions.
Oh, wow. Kim, that was fabulous. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Oh, anybody that knows me, I'm pretty geeked about your charcoal and your line work and all of that. And you're brave, you're brave to get away from the color and just dive into the values and the line work of the charcoal. I love it. So much fun. We have some questions. First of all, we have someone that said, Tara, who says she does have your poster and loves it. And she says, do you think having a blog helped your process?
I think what helps your process is having a means to sit and reflect. And that looks different for everybody. For me, I love to write, and I've always been someone who's journaled or kept a diary my whole life. So a blog seemed like a great natural extension of that, as well as a way to do that publicly or digitally and roll that into any marketing or promotion that I could do for my studio. But if a blog or writing or publishing your writing feels too intimidating or scary, then just get yourself a $1 composition notebook and sit and do a thumbnail of the painting and make a bullet list of what you learned in the process, or whatever it is that you want to take away from the piece. You can construct your reflection to match whatever your superpowers are, because really ultimately you want to set it up to be a habit or a routine that you want to keep. You don't want it to ever become something you regret or resent's the better word, or becomes drudgery or you don't want to do it.
Sure. Now you mentioned 3 pages. Do you do the Julia Cameron, the creative journaling?
Well, I broke her rules.
Rules you're a rule breaker,
right? Rules are made for breaking. I have started that book probably 5 times in my lifetime, not just since I've been a professional or a working artist. And I always each time I get a little bit further, but then I find that there are things in her prompts, like I'll hit a prompt or 2 that don't resonate with me. And so I would rather go down a different lane and write about different things. But yes, I absolutely do sit my morning routine is yoga, meditation, morning pages, and then I go to the computer. So if I can get those things in before the noise of the day starts, then I know I'm going to have a productive day that began in a rooted space for me. And yeah, so my version of morning pages, absolutely.
Obviously it's paying off because your work is fabulous. But real quick, no coffee in the morning?
I'm not much of a coffee drinker, but I will, when it gets cold, because I'm cold all the time, I had a coffee this morning, but I don't have it every day.
It's probably good. One question here is, did you paint in a different media or always the same? So I guess you work in acrylic. Have you always worked in acrylic?
I worked in acrylic with a segue into oil painting in college. and I didn't like oil painting. I don't know. I think I wasn't a good enough painter yet. And I didn't have an instructor who was willing to teach me how to, or able to teach me how to adapt the media to match the way my brain worked. And acrylic paints are immediate. They allow me to be impulsive. They allow me to work quickly. And oil paints require, at least in my view, they require a lot more reflection, introspection, quiet, and a ton of technique before you even are successful in them. And those were things that I did not have when I first tried oil paints. I have been thinking about shifting to oils, but I haven't done it. I did try them briefly about 10 years ago, and I was just as frustrated with them then as I was. So yeah, I may try them one day, but I can definitely see the value of knowing how to mix the right color, knowing how to draw properly, understanding values, on top of the technique of the media. You have to be a master in those in order to be successful in oils. Otherwise, you just end up with a mess.
Sure. Yep. Okay. On the Burton Fox, what golden product are you using on top of the drawing?
Which fox?
It says Burden, B-O-R-D-E-N, Burton Fox. Maybe.
I'm not sure which piece that is.
I think it was maybe she's gonna,
golden, maybe?
Oh no, that's right. Thank you. The fat fox. That I was gonna wonder that too.
Okay.
Yeah. Was
All
that
right? Sorry about that. I did say she was carrying my bird. She was carrying my burden.
Your burden. Oh,
Yeah.
burden.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So
Burden.
what was the paint that I used?
Yes.
Is that the question? I had a tub, I believe I had a big tub of zinc white, which is a very transparent white paint. And I put it on with a really wide, stiff, frayed, straggly brush. So I wasn't getting any crisp marks. I had very little control over putting the paint down. And it was stiff because I wanted it to pick up the charcoal and sort of bleed the charcoal into the white paint, which is transparent, so you can see through it.
Sure.
So I hate zinc white in my actual paintings, but I love it in my drawings because it's a great tool to reveal the history.
Why don't you like it in your paintings?
Because it's too transparent.
Too transparent. Okay.
It's too transparent. And because I work from general to specific, oftentimes I need to clean up edges a little bit. I'm refining my drawing as I go. And transparency is great because I do lean into glazes. I use a lot of glazing, but I don't want my white to be transparent. I want it to be opaque, both for mixing reasons as well as layering.
That's good to know. I never knew that. Great. You use Taylor's chalk. What color was that? I saw someone wanted to know, on one of the foxes you were doing, oh no, it was the bear. You did. Yeah, you first were using a black, and then later on, after you added a couple layers of paint, you added in some other colors. Were those also Taylor?
The original drawing was Taylor's chalk, and I thought I had chosen a dark blue one, but it ended up being black, and I didn't realize that till I got it wet, and you can actually see the color base of the dark. But I went in after that with a piece of Derwent ink tints, and they're little blocks. They're like the compressed pastel blocks, but they're ink based. They're really highly pigmented. I love those things. And I also may have used for the orange lines in that one, Woody Stabilo. And they're actually like these stumpy, thick, water soluble crayons. They have a wax base. Their pigment load isn't super heavy, but I do like them because they come in really bold colors.
Great. Okay. Let's see. Oh, do you mount your drawings to panels rather than on a mat and frame? And how do you seal your work if you're using all these different mediums?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I have two different kinds of drawings that you saw in this presentation. So the 18 by 24s were done on mixed media paper. And I masked the perimeter off so that they would all have the same like 1.5-inch border. And when I presented those for the show, I simply put them on a piece of foam core that was acid-free foam core that was the same size as the drawing. And I slipped them in a cellophane bag. I did hit them quickly with spray fixative so that any charcoal that was left on the surface would not cling to the cellophane and break the image in any way. But I will say by the time those pieces are done, there's so much paint in them and in different acrylic mediums that by the time they're done, most of the charcoal, like 99% of the charcoal and the pencil lines are already underneath a layer of something like zinc white.
Sure.
Clear gel medium of some sort. The other drawings that I do on recycled materials, and I think there was an envelope one in there in the slide next to the Fox Medicine postcard. I do those on recycled materials. I have a fixative on them, and then I mount them onto a cradled wooden panel, and I wire the panel and they hang directly on the wall. And I also seal them with acrylic matte medium after they're mounted. So the drawing gets fixed, then it gets adhered, then it gets sealed, and then it's good to go. It doesn't need to go behind glass.
Yeah. Do you ever use glass or acrylic?
I don't use glass. My preference is immediacy of the surface, and I think glass presents a barrier. But I may end up changing my mind now that I'm doing more drawings.
Sure. Good. Okay. Let's see. I have to leave. Let's see, what else do we have here? Oh, are you very active on social media? And how do you balance your time against art making? We all get sucked into Instagram and
yeah, we've all been sucked in. I am really active, and I think for me, I was lucky in that I built my business up before there was social media. So I had to learn how to build a website. I had to learn how to sell on eBay. I even was on Etsy for a little bit. So I was able to kind of baby step into social media, whereas people who are starting now, we have all these platforms and you have to do all the things. So yeah, I'm pretty active. I have a big routine to my day. I talked about my morning routine. I'm such a habit-based or rooted person. When I take breaks between my tasks, whether it's fielding emails or making phone calls or working at the easel, I try to take a picture and then post that on social media. And I actually, because I am a compulsive list maker, I actually have a little checklist of things so that
type it up.
A checklist of things so I can track and see what platforms I've posted to, what format I've done that in, because that's how I hold myself accountable. It's way too easy. I found when I get busy, it's way too easy for me to let that slide. And because I'm a business and not a hobbyist painter, it's important for me. It's critical for me that I maintain that presence. So the checklist keeps me honest.
So do you have a time, like you'll set aside like 4 o'clock in the afternoon? Do you set a timer and I'm going to use this time to do my social media stuff?
Not really. It's more organic than that. Like if I find that my painting's too wet and I need to sit and let her dry for a bit, then I may sit with my studio log and write about the painting process. And then I may take an in-process photo and share that, or I could go take the dogs for a walk and encounter a beautiful tree or something and take a photo of that and post that. I give myself a lot of latitude in what I share and a lot of grace. I don't do it regimented.
So at what point, I think a lot of people like to show their work in progress is really kind of standing out in front of, everybody in their underwear. I mean, that's a great thing to do. I mean, did it take you a while to be able to do that, or?
Yeah. I think that was something that daily painting taught me too, because if I did a really crappy painting, I still felt obligated to share it.
Sure.
And honestly, when I shared the crappy paintings and I said, I had a horrible day at the easel. I couldn't get into my flow. I couldn't get this drawing down. If my life saved me, I, thought I laid out a different blue than I actually did, whatever it was. When I stood up and said, you know what, I had a really rough day, everybody sort of gathers around you because they can relate to that.
Yeah.
And it doesn't change the fact that you had a rough day, but I think it also breaks down the barrier that people who know how to paint or who have achieved a certain level of recognition in their career
Mhm.
never have a bad day. That's
Yeah.
so not true.
Yeah.
And that's something I talk to my students about all the time, because until you make a good painting, you're going to make 50 to 100 really crappy ones.
Sure.
And the scary thing is you're going to think those crappy paintings are good. And then there's going to be a point in time where you're going to look at them and you're going to say, oh, I thought, yeah, right. We all have that reckoning. It's just part of growth.
Yeah, you're right. So then you can
So-
be gentle on yourself and know that was one.
Yeah.
I've
And
learned from that.
to circle back to the in-process work, I might have a piece that's so deep in the uglies, and I'm not really sure where it's going to go, but there's a little passage that gives me goosebumps. That's a detail shot,
Mhm.
right? You don't have to show the whole thing.
Sure.
Or the pace is so bad, but maybe your palette's really pretty. Or you can do a quick still life shot of your paint cup with water filtering through it. Or there's all sorts of still beautiful moments in our tools and in our process that we could share without having to show things that we're uncomfortable with. But showing the things you're uncomfortable with will ultimately build community and show people you're human.
Sure. I have one more question. What is the brown surface you were painting on? I don't know when that was. I think maybe it was
Yeah.
painting a drawing.
It was a Square Bear demo. So that was
Square Bear
just
demo.
a plain piece of masonite. I'm so glad you asked that because I forgot to mention that. So masonite is just a form of hardboard, or I think it's called MDF board. I'm having a little brain fart. But it's an untempered board and it's relatively inexpensive. I love using it for paintings up to a certain size. It's not cradled, so it's super easy to ship. And since collectors often want to put their own frame on it anyway, it's a bit more affordable to buy molding for a flat panel than it is for anything that has depth to it. But I love the surface. Also, it takes a lot of abuse. And I like to draw really hard. Sometimes I'll carve back into paint. If a painting's really sucky, I take it outside and I sand it with the belt sander. And the MDF board works really well for that. And I just purchased mine online from my art supplier. You can also go into Home Depot and you can buy the big giant sheets of it.
I've done that.
Yeah. Well, I guess I shouldn't have plugged Home Depot. You can go into a
Oh.
home store and buy big giant sheets of it and have those cut down. It stores easy. I mean, I really like it.
Yeah. Now, do you have to rough it up before? Do you sand it before or just go right onto it?
I
Well,
go right onto it. But keep in mind that I go right onto it because I like the surface and the tooth that it gives me when I'm going in with my drawing tools. But then I'm putting product over those drawing tools. And ultimately that product is going to have tooth in it and it's going to act like a gesso or like a surfactant might that would prep it for future marks. But the whole painting is ultimately sealed in behind so many layers of paint. And I don't use gesso.
Okay. You don't use gesso.
Don't use gesso as the first surface, as the first.
Great. Any other questions, folks? We've got a lot of wonderful comments about how wonderful this presentation was. It's been great. Liz, how about you? You got any questions for Kimberly?
I mean, I asked most of them in the chat, but I wrote down a few things that, just responses. And I wanted to say that thank you for pointing out the sense of joy and play that we artists need to remember to put into our work, right? Because if it's a slog, who wants to do it, right?
Well, and that's so true. And I don't want to diminish the fact that it is hard work.
Oh, definitely.
It's tremendously hard work. And there were days where when I was doing the daily painting, the daily portraits, I did not want to go in. I did not want to go to work.
Mhm.
And so it is important that there is an element of joy in what we do, because then it makes the harder work stuff, the gritty blood, sweat, and tears stuff, it makes it easier to endure.
It's like we don't want to get so good at something that we could do it by rote with our eyes closed and it's just boring, because then that's going to reflect in the painting, you know.
Yeah, and actually that's why I stopped painting dogs every day,
I bet.
because I didn't feel like I was bringing anything new to them, and
Mhm.
it wasn't fair to my collectors, how could I take on a project of a portrait of a spirit or a soul that they loved and cherished so much, and I could do that in my sleep? That didn't feel morally right.
Authentic, right.
Yeah.
There was a creativity coach that was giving free lessons on YouTube or something, a website earlier this year. And she said one thing, I took away one thing from her, and that was she wants to walk into her studio and surprise herself every day. And I went, that's what I want.
Yes. And I think another thing, something that I share with my students and we're actually working on right now, is creating a list of must-haves. If you have a list of 5 musts, these are 5 things like that if you're going to walk through a museum and a piece of art is going to draw you in, it's going to have 5 must-haves. And you can identify those musts in the art by artists who you admire. You can identify them in music or film or nature or any other aspect of your life. But if you can come up with 5 musts, and then you figure out how to put them into a visual language and put them in your paintings, you're going to fall in love with every single one of your paintings if you put your must-haves in it.
That's great. That's great advice.
So my challenge to everybody listening to this is start on your list of must-haves, figure out what's at the top of that list, and then figure out how to create a visual language out of it using the tools that you love, the types of marks that you love, creating in the atmosphere that you love. Just like invite all the things that you're passionate about into your workspace in whatever way you can. And your work is going to be all the better for it.
That's terrific. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right. So I guess all we have to say at this point is, thank everyone for joining this meeting today, and also to mention our next speaker, which I'm flipping through my notes here. Here we are. I want to thank everyone who joined us today, and also that we look forward to seeing you again in our next presentation, which will be in February with an artist named Lisa Boardwine, and I follow her on Facebook, so I know this is going to be great. So you'll be getting information about that in an email blast. All right. Anyone else? Kim?
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you so much, everybody.
We'll be following you.